Welcome back, Flyers nitty-gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
I'm doing really good, Yariv. Eventful road trip for the Flyers, going 1-1-1 since we last talked. Obviously, a lot of storylines to delve into, especially with Matvei Michkov being healthy scratched for 2 games. But even some other things, right? Like the Flyers playing actually a lot better on this road trip despite not having Michkov. So there's some intricacies we're going to get into. Some players that have kind of jumped off the page these last couple of games. So there's a lot to talk about. How you doing, my friend?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Yeah, we got a good amount to talk about. So for those who are unaware, we're obviously doing this earlier than usual. I will be in Brazil until the 19th.
Which is awesome.
I'm going to be gone for a little bit for a wedding. But we still wanted to make sure we got you guys an episode for the week. Obviously, we won't be caught up to everything. But, we're recording this on a Sunday, which we don't normally do. But we'll have an episode at least for this week. And then we'll be back to normal. And then we do have, still the big episode with Steve Cornianos coming up at the beginning of December. So, we got some good stuff ahead. Also going to have another guest on. I'll leave that announcement to when we actually have it fully scheduled. But yeah, we'll keep the content coming. Before we get started, let me do the usual spiel here. So just want to remind everybody listening to please like and subscribe. If you're listening right now and you are not subscribed, please do so. It would be awesome. Also, hit the like button if you like what we do. Hit the notification bell on YouTube to get notified on when we release our episodes in case we release them on a random night like tonight. You will be notified when it comes out. Also, for the audio versions, go to Spotify and iTunes and give us a following and a rating there as well if you can. All of that is a great way to support Vasili and I and the rest of the Flyers nitty-gritty team. We would really appreciate it. And also, shout out to our sponsors. First sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim Steaks. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. It is definitely cheesesteak season. All 4 teams are playing. When you're on South Street, inevitably, make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Ignore Pat's and Geno's and go to the real number 1. Jim's, not too far from there. Again, a South Philly great. Make sure to check out Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Also, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Make sure to check out Summit Public Adjusters for all of your insurance adjustments needs. They will be there to help you facilitate the process between you and your insurance companies. They'll help you with the paperwork and all of the headaches that come with insurance claims. Make sure to check out Summit Public Adjusters. Again, that's 215-752-0560. And also just want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date as possible on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, hit the link in the description to check out SportsSpider.com. Again, the link is in the description. Make sure to check out our partners and support them. Our stuff will be pinned at the top. Okay, let's get right into it, dude. Like you mentioned in the intro segment, the Flyers finished their road trip a decent 1-1-1, a trip where it felt like they could have walked away with more points, almost like they could have walked away with
certainly the Carolina game, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say Carolina and Florida, it feels like they could have actually walked away with 5 of the 6 points. Never felt like they were going to beat Carolina, but it did felt like they could at least squeeze into overtime. Again, Carolina has been scorching hot, and before playing the Flyers, they spanked the Bruins 8-2, and then they beat the Pens the next night after they beat the Flyers 5-1. So considering when you look at that retrospectively and how solid that team has been playing, and I think they've won 9 games in a row already, potentially. They might have lost to the Avs the other night. Can't remember. But they've just been on fire. They've been one of the best teams in the NHL, definitely in the top 3 category.
I think Panthers were 7 in a row. They won 7 in a row.
Yes, yeah. Panthers also came in red hot. You're right. I think the Panthers and the Canes are 2 of the top teams in the league right now by points just pure points, not winning percentage, but pure points. So they obviously had their work ahead of them. Tampa Bay is kind of more in the bubble wild card, 3 spot type of category. But again, all
I did still
tough
expect them to make
opponents.
the playoffs, right? Like Tampa as
Tampa,
well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so too. I think they're
So
too
all
talented.
good teams, and I mean to see the Flyers kind of at least play better, that's a good sign, right? In a sense.
Absolutely. In fact, I think you said it perfectly there. The reality is this team was just it's been a really up and down season. It's been very hard to get. They haven't looked like the team that was successful last season. But I think on this 3-game road trip, and I think you can include the game against Carolina because I think up until the end, and we mentioned this on the podcast last week, up until like the end of the third period, they really did hang with Carolina, even if they didn't get enough shots on net in the second and in the third. It was not like a game where you thought it was impossible for them to get at least a point out of. And that was something that we saw with the Flyers last year. So I would say this stretch of 3 games, even though they didn't win all 3 games and they did walk away with a 1-1-1 record, probably the best hockey they've played of the early season. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I would just say from an offensive standpoint, like even the game against Carolina, Carolina got a ton of shot attempts towards the net. Carolina did dominate at points, but I did think in that Carolina game that the Flyers sustained offensive zone pressure in a lot longer sequences than they have in prior games, right? So that was almost the turning point in a sense to getting their offensive game back to where they wanted it. I mean, even in Tampa Bay, they were getting some chances. They just really weren't finishing as often. Obviously, with Florida, you see kind of that come to fruition where firstly, they're getting a lot of shots on it to begin the game. Secondly, they're finishing on their chances at a lot higher volume than they were in the Tampa Bay game, obviously scoring, as much as they did against Florida there. I would say against the Panthers, they probably played their best game of the season, in my opinion, right? Like, if you look at how they played against Florida, just in terms of creating chances off the rushing pucks towards the net, sustaining offensive zone pressure, I think that was probably their best offensive game against the defending Stanley Cup champions in the Florida Panthers. So that's certainly a good sign in the right direction. And even if you look at like just shot quality creating scoring chances, like in terms of high danger scoring chances, so the real quality chances, the Flyers did outchance the Panthers 15-13, and that's per natural stat trick. And then for scoring chances in general, they outchanced them 33-32. So though it's close, you're keeping pace and kind of keeping up with the defending Stanley Cup champs. So it's a good sign for the future, despite the fact, they can't solve Bobrovsky in overtime on 5 breakaways, which is crazy. What a game, right? Like, you'd have to think if it's another goalie in net, they probably win that just with, some of the 10 bellers that Bobrovsky made. But I think it's a good sign just in the sense that you're coming home to playing a San Jose team now on Monday. You just have to hope you don't kind of sink down to their energy level. You want to kind of keep up the pace, keep up the intensity. And I think a real, positive is that we saw their transition offense look a lot better. They were kind of moving the puck out of their zone a lot cleaner, up through the neutral zone, and actually creating, scoring chances through the rush, which hasn't really been something that they've been doing, for most of the season so far.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I mean, clearly Bob was the X factor there. Ersson also played well. He did give up, I would say, one savable goal, definitely savable.
Yeah.
But outside of that, he definitely hung on with Bob. Bob being, I guess, one of the best goalies of the decade. It's kind of hard to deny that, whether he's had ups and downs. 3 Vezinas, championship, like, he is what he is. Like, he's one of the best goalies in hockey, right? And
he's going to be a Hall of Famer with that resume. So
yeah, I mean, there's a really good chance, and he's still got time left, and he's on a really good team, so his numbers will continue to rise. For all we know, they could win another Stanley Cup. They're good enough to do so again this year. They're clearly one of the best teams in hockey once again. But I thought the Flyers really took it to them. Again, it's another game where they surpassed 30 shots on net. That was a huge problem for them. And the reality is they've been playing better in the offensive zone, not just shooting blindly, but they definitely have made a point to get the puck on net more often. They've also been driving the net more often. They've been more aggressive in the middle, which you didn't see enough of. but the confidence seems to be there. They're also getting some bounces, like the Hathaway goal to tie the game, right? Like that was kind of a lucky bounce. Even the game before the game against Carolina, we brought it up on the podcast. The luck was kind of on their side in that game. Like a lot of that bad luck that they were having that kind of had them spiraling seems to be dissipating.
I
Right?
agree. I would say that too, like with the Hathaway goal, though you get the lucky bounce, it's almost like luck earned in a sense because you have to
Yes.
think about
The
how
move.
many posts,
Oh
did
yeah.
they hit throughout that Florida game?
Yes.
Also, how many chances, did Owen Tippett have like in on Bob or even just like breakaways that other players had? So sometimes when you're, creating a lot of offensive chances in general, those breaks tend to go your way in a sense because you're just throwing so much volume towards the net.
Right.
Something's bound to go in, right? And that's
Yes.
kind of something that they weren't doing. And that really was a staple of why they were able to surprise so many teams last season because despite the fact that they aren't a very top heavy lineup really in terms of skill or might not be able to match up with some of the contenders in the league a la Florida. When you're playing a style where you're first of all pushing the pace offensively, trying to rush the puck up ice like they were doing successfully against the Panthers, but when you're also putting so many, shots towards the net, a lot of volume towards the net, especially against a goalie like Bobrovsky, that's going to help you create even more offensive opportunities, right? And I think a lot of the sentiment in the locker room, at least after the game, like if you listen to Scott Lawton's interview, some of the other players as well, they said they acknowledge this is the way they need to play to be successful, and they really need to take certain aspects of this game and certain elements of it and ensure they bring that home for this long, extended homestand because it'll be a chance for them to really, first of all, kind of cement an identity for themselves because they really haven't had an identity as a team yet this season. I think this homestand is going to be a chance for them to kind of get back to what made them so successful last season and kind of implement those elements going forward here and see if they can kind of, get things turned around and kind of move closer to that, wild card bubble mix as they kind of want to be. So,
yeah. And this is what I was talking about when people were like kind of getting obsessed with the beginning of the season and, thinking the beginning of the season defines your season. I've never believed in that, especially after I've seen countless teams start at the bottom of the league and then go to the finals. Or start at the top and completely collapse. We've seen plenty examples of both. I've definitely seen it over the past 25 plus years of watching the game. And, we saw a lot of good signs that this team is trending in the right direction, not to become that full-fledged Stanley Cup contender, but to get back to be that team that they were, where they were playing relevant games until the very last game of the season.
They're competitive nightly, right? That like mentality where no matter who they're facing, it's going to be a tough matchup against the Flyers.
Yeah, and they're a younger squad than they were last year too, which tells me that if they can continue this momentum up, assuming it continues, they could actually get better as the season goes on, not lose gas. And they might be able to sneak into a playoff spot or at the very least improve, and you take that momentum into next year. And we always talked about follow the money, and we clearly see that the money window starts opening up next year, and then that following year, that's your real year. So you have to take next year as, hey, this is the first step to getting out of the rebuild. It's not this year. We've been talking about it, I don't know how many months already, that his season is still a rebuilding year. And if you can improve as the season goes on and build on what they're doing and start refining these elements of their game, showing that what we saw last year for long stretches isn't a fluke, that's really important. And it's important for the guys that are going to be part of this moving forward, regardless of what people write on Twitter about the talentless stuff. If some people are writing this stuff to me, like, I don't respond because I don't agree, and I'm not into getting a Twitter spat with people. I get people's frustration, so I don't jump on them. And people have the right to voice their opinions, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're being overzealous. But I think we are seeing that team come out that we believed was heading in the right direction. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, because obviously this is the big topic, and Vasili and I both have our thoughts. They're pretty similar on this subject matter. Having said that, there's nothing we can really do about it. So we're just talking about our opinions here. So, it doesn't really help anybody to fully freak out over this, which I haven't seen people really freaking out, but, I understand.
I've seen some pretty interesting ones online.
Fair enough. But that also won't really do you much good. But so the elephant in the room is that Matvei Michkov wasn't just benched against Tampa Bay, where the Flyers did win in overtime. That quite in Tortorella fashion, after a team wins a game, he tends to go with the exact same lineup. And the Flyers called up Anthony Richard. He had a pretty good game in Tampa Bay. Actually, almost won it in regulation. Pretty good for his role. Again, not like an amazing player, but I like him. I really do like him.
Good depth option.
Yeah, he is. I have nothing against him. And then obviously with winning that game in Tampa Bay, and we're going to talk about Fedotov a little bit later, winning that game in Tampa Bay, rolled the same lineup into the Florida game, did not put Matvei Michkov back in the game. Now Michkov has been sat out 2 games in a row as a healthy scratch. And obviously this has hit people in a lot of ways. Frustrating for the both of us. I'm not going to speak, obviously I'll give you your opportunity here to completely vocalize what you think about it. You know what? Why don't you go first on it, and then I'll put my 2 cents in it. So, like, obviously he's been out 2 games. Everybody's really frustrated from that aspect. I don't think anybody is happy to see him sit out of the lineup. I think some people understand it more than others. But it's definitely, the one tweet I had online, and then I'll open up to Vasili, is the Flyers are definitely a more interesting team when they're more fun to watch when
they're
Michkov
less
plays.
boring when Michkov's in the lineup, obviously, because there's just more happening on the ice in terms of the skill, the creativity. And you lose a little bit of that, right? You don't see as much of that creative element, creative spark without him in the lineup. And that's, I think, most noticed on the power play. Like, they were kind of addressing how they set up the power play and certain things a little bit differently without him there. But just in terms of it, I mean, I think for me and the way that I'm looking at it, I get why the coaching staff did it. I mean, if you look at his 5-on-5 play, hasn't been great throughout the season. Hasn't been, something that is jumping off the page like his power play production. Though you do have to note that, I mean, that Couturier, Konechny, Michkov line per money puck in terms of expected goals for, still like 24th, I believe, in the league with like a .62 or something expected goals for percentage. I can pull the number up just to get it 100% here, but yeah, essentially that offensive line, like at 5-on-5, a 60.6% expected goals. So I do understand, like, defensive troubles at 5-on-5. Obviously, you have Couturier and Konechny there to kind of help him there, and that probably drags the number up. And I think there is some shortcomings for Michkov just in terms of like the coverages, maybe missing certain coverages, maybe not understanding certain places to go, and maybe the language barrier, comes into play there. I think if it was just for a 1-game scratch, I could understand it more, because there is a certain sense of, okay, like, you're going to get scratched. You can learn from sitting and watching, right? There is certain things you can notice, certain things you might be able to pick up. There is something that is valuable to that and helping your learning curve as a young player. I think the main thing too is the KHL schedule is a lot different than the NHL schedule. It's really only a 50-game season, so I could understand that Michkov's played a lot of hockey, especially with training camp too, in a very condensed period of time. So I understand him not also being, used to rigors of an NHL schedule. So I get why they want to sit him. There's certain things maybe he can learn in terms of coverages. Maybe it helps him kind of reset. I also noticed that they sit him on the road and not at home. And I'm sure that's designed because they don't want, Flyers fans that are paying hard-earned money to miss out on seeing him, especially in a home game situation. So I definitely understand it. My thing, and the reason why I think I'm opposed to it, is firstly, in terms of hockey, and at least when I played, and my understanding of the game was always a lot better when I was working on things on the ice. You can watch for as much as you want, but until you're actually on the ice in that situation, that's where you're really going to learn, right? So I think it would have been more beneficial for him to sit out against Tampa, get back in there against your defending, Stanley Cup champions, because who is there better else to learn and try to, kind of step up in that moment and kind of do what the coaching staff is telling you against that Stanley Cup defending champion, the Florida Panthers. So I think it would have been a better situation to get him back in there. And no matter what you say, like, the Flyers do score 3 goals against Florida. They win that game in the shootout against Tampa, but Michkov, and there's no doubt about it, 10 points in the 13 games. He's one of their biggest offensive threats, might be one of their best offensive players already at 19. I just think when you're a team that's struggling to score, scratching him for 2 games straight isn't the smartest idea. Like in that Florida game, for example, who knows if he has that, one of those breakaway chances in overtime, does he score that? Does he score in the shootout? Obviously, it's woulda, coulda, shoulda. He's not in the lineup, but those are things that come to mind when I'm watching the game, thinking, hey, like maybe his elusiveness, his creativity could come in handy here. Even in that Tampa game, they were down 1-0 midway through the third. I'm thinking to myself, watching that, saying they could probably use a guy like Michkov's, like Michkov with his skill and creativity to break that game wide open and maybe get on the board for them. So that's my thoughts. I don't agree with the scratch. I don't really think that he's going to learn too much from it. I think as a hockey player, you're always going to learn more on the ice than sitting up in the press box, and I'm sure most players would tell you that, and they likely feel the same way. So that's just my perspective, but chances are he's going to be right back in there, on Monday here. And the reset and having some time off is probably going to help him, just in the sense that he isn't used to this type of schedule. So there probably will be fresh legs and he'll be a little bit more rejuvenated. But in a long-term situation, I mean, this isn't going to make or break his development. Maybe he learned something from this. We'll have to see. Maybe Tortorella looks like a genius, right? Maybe this is the start of the team turning their play around. Michkov comes back in and, they're all speed ahead, right? And they really hit the ground running here. He could look great, but I just think that, to scratch not your two offensive players, but to scratch one of your 2 best offensive players, you left some points on the table. Maybe that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal for them is his long-term development, and I see that, but you do leave some points on the table, I believe, just, by him not playing.
So yeah, I'll talk about, first of all, if you're Tortorella and you're going to do this, there is risk involved in it. I do want to talk about the fact that I think Tortorella has earned some trust from not just us, but from everybody in general, that he has pushed these buttons in the past. Not 100% of the time has it worked, but it has worked in the past. Let's give him credit with that. With even guys like Bobby Brink, Morgan Frost, like he's pushed guys, right? And he's pushing Michkov. And the expectation for Michkov is, quite frankly, much higher than other players, higher than Morgan Frost. It's very high. It's at least as high as Travis Konechny, if not beyond that. And we've seen him bench Travis Konechny when Konechny was leading the team in points, and Kevin Hayes in the same game, right, where he didn't play them. So nobody is immune to this. He did, on the other hand, do this to Sean Couturier, where both you and I are like, are we watching the same thing here? Like, he kind of was doing it to Couturier this year, and we're like, this doesn't make sense because Couturier's not playing bad.
He's playing really well,
and then there was like an admission that was the case, and now Couturier is your top line center, and he hasn't moved even an inch away from that since. So there is a little bit of like Tortorella, and he's mentioned this in other things with his Scott Hartnell story, where he was like riding Scott Hartnell, and then he's he's driving me nuts out there, and then he rewatched the footage, and he's playing well, actually. I'm wrong. He's like, I'm wrong. He's like, something about it makes me uncomfortable, but when I go back and rewatch it, he's in the right position. He wasn't a weakness on this play. So again, he's not perfect, right?
No, nobody is. Yeah. And I totally get too that, like, if you're Tortorella, this has worked for you in the past, so why not try it again, use it as a motivator? So I get his perspective.
It is a tool in his tool set. It has proven to work at times. You mentioned that Michkov hasn't been playing amazing at 5-on-5. Defensively, at times he's either late on a play or makes a risky play, and then he's explosive at other times, right? So at 5-on-5, he's definitely had his inconsistencies, and defensively, he's been more of like a wash, right? Like, he doesn't make a ton of great defensive plays. He's had some, but he doesn't really make a lot, and he's not an impact in the defensive zone, which I think is a definite thing the team needs to improve upon. The risk that I think is taking it, and you mentioned it, is he, at the time, especially, and he still is after missing 2 games, he's second on the team in points. A lot of the times when he's benched guys, they were actually struggling.
Or not producing.
Like, you could say, oh, they are not producing at all. Like, he had an assist in the game before he was benched, and he was benched in the third period of that game. Again, you're responsible to be good at both ends of the ice. And again, the expectations for Michkov are higher. And I know that, and Tortorella knows that. So we can pretend like Tortorella is ignorant and angry. That's not really the reality. I don't like the benching either, right? I don't like it because it's a weird thing because you're telling the guy he's not doing well enough. I assume they're being told that it's a defensive thing because you look at the stats and he was what, like 3 points behind Konechny or something like that at the time. So it's like I just worry that it falls on deaf ears when the guy is succeeding. Having said that, I would hope that Michkov is humble enough to recognize that he still has things to work on in his game. I do expect Michkov to handle this well. I really do.
I do too. Yeah.
To come in and to be successful. I'm not going to freak out about it. I definitely didn't like it. I don't like watching the team as much when he's out of the lineup. It actually bothers me because I'm like, this team, it has an X factor just sitting in the press box. Not like a guy who I know can be better. A guy who is already an X factor at 19 years old. Just
and that
sitting.
was my point, Yariv, with the Florida game, where it's like it's a tie game, or in Tampa when you need that goal. You're thinking this is the type of skill they need right at this point to potentially maybe produce that offensive opportunity for them, right?
And the type of game that Tampa plays, I think he actually would have been successful against Tampa Bay because they are not a rough and tumble team like the Boston Bruins.
Or like Florida's a little tougher on the board in front of their net as well.
Yes,
so.
I think Michkov would excel, especially when he sees that like Kucherov is on the other end of that.
It's also game, a motivator as a young Russian player. He's
exactly.
a guy he's watched
exactly.
But like I said, like I understand the coaching staff's motives for it. Personally, I wouldn't have done it. Like, I just think learning on ice is a lot more valuable, especially against these types of playoff contenders and playoff teams. I get the one game. I think the one game I could have maybe lived with it. I might have had maybe a different kind of opinion on it. But with the 2 games, I just think it's a little bit too much. I just don't think it's warranted in the sense that, he's been producing really well offensively. He's never going to be a defensive dynamo. So,
I wouldn't say never.
No, he has.
We don't know
IQ.
if he will be.
He has the hockey IQ, but I'm just saying, like as a rookie, you can't expect him to come in and be lights out defensively.
Well,
so, like to have a couple missed coverages, maybe you've preached that to him. But I just think let him work through it on the ice. That's how you're actually going to learn. Watching isn't going to behoove anybody. And
that's kind of what bothered me about it is that it was kind of contradictory to what he said before. Is that I'm not going to nitpick his defensive game.
Exactly.
I'm going to let him.
Weeks ago, right?
Yes, so. And then all of a sudden he's nitpicking.
It's a little hypocritical in a sense.
Like you can see his plus minus and all that, but at the same time, look at the other guys on the team who have played better.
Playing also like shit at 5-on-5.
Have a lower plus minus on the team. So it's not like his direct play is leading to a bunch of turnovers that are leading to the Flyers losing.
He's a net positive if you think about. If you think about it from that perspective, there hasn't
been a game where he's been a net negative.
Yeah,
I think maybe the one game. What was the one game where he had his clear-cut worst game where I think he was exhausted? Maybe it was against Boston. Yeah. I think it was against Boston where he was like look tired. Again, he's 19 years old. I'm okay with it, but. It's got to work.
That's kind of my whole. Also, too. Well, I think for if it's a 3-game thing, like if he's not playing Monday against the Sharks, I don't think that's the right way to do it. You risk potentially souring things, beyond a 2-game, especially with the way he's played so early. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we're a little sensitive because we want Michkov to play, and.
You know what I mean? Like, sure, I definitely want him to play.
Right, that's the thing. We are biased, right? We have to recognize that, and he is not. I don't think Tortorella is as biased as we are, and sometimes we actually project on him that he's more biased than we are. But I do think he's stubborn at the same time, right? And I think there's some of the stubbornness coming out in this where it's like, you did say that you were going to ease up on him on the defensive side. He's not been a net negative pretty much in any situation. He's had some turnovers. I think in Tortorella's mind, if I want to assume positive intent, I think he literally thinks that like if I bench him, he's going to remember that in the back of his mind because he knows Michkov wants to play more than everything. Yeah, we all know that will hopefully trigger something in the back of his head that he will hesitate to make that risky play in the wrong time because this is actually what hurt him with Scott. Right, this is what Scott didn't like about him is that he didn't have his defensive game refined. I actually, I know you were just kind of speaking off the cuff, so I don't want to put an opinion I don't want to state your opinion because I'm sure there's more nuance in what you were saying, but I do believe he can be a really good defensive player too. So if Tortorella can get that out of him, it might be worth the benching or whatever, right?
For sure.
But it's a risk. It's a risk, and you better be right. That's my whole point. I don't know if he's right. I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's ultimately going to motivate him, and it's probably going to help his development. So it's going to make Tortorella look good. I just think you could, like, from my perspective, I just don't think benching a player is the active way to go about it, especially if he's producing like he was, right?
Right. That's the problem.
I just think that, like, the best way to learn is through experience on the ice. Not being on the ice isn't going to help you learn much. I mean, maybe sure you can watch some things from up top, and maybe it helps you kind of understand where you need to slip into your coverage. But for 2 games, I mean, what are you talking about? Like, I would say, like, being on the ice, learning on the ice is the best way forward. I don't agree with the decision, but at this point it's over with. So it is what it is.
I'm pretty sure that he would have benched Connor Bedard last year.
Which I also wouldn't have agreed with. I think that's also stupid.
Like, if Bedard was on the Flyers, because Bedard is also not good defensively. And if he was on the Flyers, he would have benched him also at some point during the season.
These guys are net positives offensively. Work with them defensively in practice on the coverages. Let them learn in game. You're not chasing a cup. What do you lose by playing him in these games?
Right. So, well, I guess in Tortorella's mind, he wants to get the team out of the spiral they were on. But I
don't think Michkov is any reason for the spiral. Maybe taking him out helps a reset for him. I think if they framed it in the sense that, like, hey, like, we need you to reset. It's a lot of games for you in a short period. Take this as a bit of a break. I could understand it more. I don't know if they did it that way behind closed doors.
Yeah, we have no idea.
Possible, but that would be interesting, and I could agree with that framing of it more. But to say that it's because of his play, I don't think it's warranted.
Yeah. I mean, there are times I watch his play, and in certain situations where I'm like, I didn't love that.
And then the next shift, he does something great offensively that makes it worth it. So
because and then I know when I'm watching him, I'm like, yeah, he's 19, he'll get it. You know what I mean? Like, that stuff will be few and far between. Because if we go back to Travis Konechny's early career too, he also had plays like that.
Yeah.
Where he would take chances and it would lead to opposite. And that's where actually I do trust Shaw and Torts. I'm like, look what they did to Travis Konechny. It's like so rare that you bring up a bad defensive play by Konechny at this point. So I'm like, can they get that out of Michkov by, like, next year? Like, I don't know. So, like, part of me wants to trust in Tortorella, but at the same time, he is one of the only coaches in the league that leverages this as much as he does, right? Like, other coaches do not jump to benching the same way that that Tortorella does. Like, he doesn't hesitate to do it. And it is what makes him more unique and frustrating for people too, because it is frustrating for everybody to know that we have a generational talent sitting in the press box when we're struggling to score. So we'll see. But I think Charlie O'Connor kind of confirmed that what he's hearing around the team also is that it wasn't intended to go longer than 2 games ever, and that the second game really came because of the victory. And now they didn't really win the game anyway, so, like, he can't really say that on top of that. But I think even Charlie said, and again, this shout out to Charlie and PHLY, so I'll give him credit for that. So you guys can go check out that episode from the post game. That they talked about, that even if they won this game, that Michkov is coming back in. So I'm glad that at least the rationale is there, that it's not like, we're just going to, he's one of the, he's got to earn a spot just like everybody else. It's
I would expect him to come
silly
back
when he's second on the team.
Yeah, I would expect him to come back in the lineup. And obviously, I mean, if he doesn't, I'm sure the home crowd's going to have interesting reaction to it. So
yeah,
that'll be fun to see too.
But at the same time, like, Torts, no offense to the fans, from his position, I think the GM Danny Briere needs to worry about it. But so much like Torts, he can't worry about what the fans want, right? He has to do what he thinks is the best move.
He's not going to care, but
right, like, I think legitimately, I don't think he planned on keeping Michkov out for 2 games. I think he looked at the way the team played. They played their best game of the season against Tampa Bay. and he's like, let's let this roll again.
He's
Just like he didn't want to bench Zamula for as long as he
likely
did.
hoping it's a reset, right? And it's acts as a motivator. So we'll see what happens. I think he's going to take it positively. I mean, I wouldn't have done it. That's my prerogative on it.
Yeah. So I guess in contrast, Anthony Richard did play well against Florida. Yeah. He scored a nice goal, right? He had solid game. Again, I really like him. I like the way he skates. I like that he has offensive skill. I don't see him as more than a third line player in the NHL. And I do wonder what his role will be, though I do suspect he's going to be sent back down.
Probably, yeah.
Pretty soon. And quite frankly, the Phantoms could use him because they're on a roll right now, and he is their best player in general. So I like him. It's good to know he's there in case we fall into some injuries. I thought he had a really nice goal and an important goal against Florida. And again, almost the game winner against Tampa Bay. So good to see that from Richard. I'm not going to lie. I was like, when he scored, I was like, please we'll make sure this has nothing to do with Michkov. Like, don't pin Richard in a losing situation where he is the guy replacing Michkov, because that's not the reality of the situation.
Yeah,
the reality is there are separate things, and you can always sit Delorier and put Richard in if that's really what you want.
I'd much rather they do that, to be honest. I mean, though I respect what Delorier does and he brings a certain element.
I love him. I can't help but love Delorier.
Yeah, I just think that, I mean, from a best lineup
roster, yes.
Yeah, putting your best lineup together, I mean, having Richard in there, probably a better hockey player.
Yeah, I love his speed
on the ice.
Yeah,
really. I would say that's a huge element of probably why they brought him up, is you have Paling out. You want to kind of replace a little bit of that speed with Richard, and he's looked good, right? I wouldn't be opposed to having him, stick up and stay with the team. Maybe have Delorier sit out if Paling's going to be out long term, and you get Michkov back in there as well. Do I expect it to happen? I don't know, but we'll have to see what happens with Paling, because I don't know. There's supposedly some sort of injury, but he also has a family matter going on, so I don't know how correlated that is, and like if it's not really a long injury for him. So we'll kind of see.
Yeah.
But Richard's looked good. And I think for him, like, he's a depth guy. If he can get you a couple of goals here and there as he's in the lineup, that's pretty much all you want from him, as long as he can, stay speedy and he's not killing you defensively.
I think they could put him with Cates and Hathaway and have it kind of supplement for the Paling, Cates Hathaway unit. I think there's definitely room to do that. I just love Delorier's personality, and I'm like, I like having him around. I like having a tough guy, when needed, but I just don't see the need in playing him every game. And when I see Michkov out of the lineup and Delorier's in, it's kind of like, it's like, this is not a knock on you, Delorier, but like, come on.
It's like, in terms of talent, right? What would be the better lineup? It's pretty clear cut. So
let's talk about talent. And two guys who have been really coming back to form, which we've been waiting for this, and it's been building. And obviously, these are very crucial parts, especially of the left side, the Flyers' left side. Joel Farabee, in particular, has been really improving on a game-to-game basis. He's had some scoring chances in general. Finally scores one against Florida, an important goal. He's really starting to look more like his old self. It is very important that he gets back up to speed. But he is kind of building his way back up. I really would like to see him kind of move up the lineup, even though I do like him with Brink. I don't think he needs to be with Brink or something like that to be successful. But it's really great that Farabee has been kind of getting his game back, because he's a very important player to this team's future. And then on top of that, obviously, Owen Tippett, who has been on the top line now for a few games in a row with Couturier and TK. And Owen Tippett, especially last night against Florida, but really Florida and Tampa Bay, really looking like old Owen Tippett. He did score against Carolina, right? He scored a very nice goal against the Hurricanes. Just a ripper of a wrist shot. But in general, like, starting to put up points and just driving play and creating offense on his own. Like, the reason why we love him, using his body, using his speed, really started looking like Owen Tippett of last season again. And this is kind of what, we were hoping for. And this is why, and again, I don't want to talk about Michkov the whole time, but this is like why I wish Michkov was out there. Because I'm like, all right, now the other guys are getting going. Michkov probably has left 5-6 points, on the table there because guys just couldn't put the puck in the net. And now guys are putting the puck in the net. And I really believe Michkov should be above a point per game the way he's played offensively. And now the team is starting to get going. And I think a big part of that is Farabee and Tippett. We'll talk a little bit about TK and Coots, but really overall, like those guys have really come out to play. And it's very important. I have a feeling it's just kind of the tip of the iceberg for what we're going to see. And I think they're both kind of catching fire. And confidence is a big part of this game. And it looks like both of them are kind of getting their confidence back.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would say for Farabee, like it wasn't just the last game. And I think it was great to see him get rewarded because he's probably been one of their best players since that Carolina game, just in terms of like driving play offensively. That whole line, really, like him and Brink and Lawton have been really good in the offensive zone, driving play offensively, getting it on the forecheck, kind of getting the forecheck game going when their transition game really hasn't been. And we've seen it turn around a little bit, and they've been starting to kind of utilize the transition that line as well. But they were the ones kind of pushing the play when it wasn't kind of working for them in Carolina, getting that forecheck going, sustaining ozone pressure. Farabee's really been all over it. I thought in Tampa, he deserved probably a better fate and probably to, have a couple points and factor in on some goals. And at least, he is able to get a goal against the Panthers. And I think for Farabee too, you're totally right in the sense that he's a player, I think, with more ice time can even, produce even more here. I don't know if he has to be stapled to that third line. I think potentially we're going to talk about, Morgan Frost and just his utilization and kind of how the team's been using him. But maybe Farabee is a guy that gets some more ice time going ahead now with kind of Frost sitting. And you have to look at it, right? Like against his ice time's been ramping up here. So, the most it really has been for a lot of the season coming through. So I think, the last 3 games has been his most ice time, 15-27 time on ice against Carolina, 16 minutes 36 time on ice against Tampa, and then 19-22 time on ice against Florida. And it's really well deserved for Farabee, right? Just with how he's been playing. I would say for Tippett too, he's a guy that it's really about the shots on net. Like he had 7 shots on net against the Panthers. When he's shooting the puck and getting the puck on net effectively and using his speed to do so, that's kind of when he's at his best. And the last 2 games before that as well against Tampa and Carolina, he combined 9 shots on net, 6 shots on net in Carolina, 3 shots on net in Tampa, and back-to-back goals in those games as well. So for the Flyers, we've been saying it, right? Like they're a team that they might not have that true elite top, like bona fide top line, but they really have a lot of guys that should be, hovering around that 20 goal and more mark, and they haven't really been scoring. So it kind of, explains why their offense has been really dry. Now we kind of see those guys like Farabee, Tippett, Brink come around a little bit more here. You're going to probably see them succeed more and produce more offense, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they've been really important. And I guess not contradict is not the word. I guess the opposite end of that spectrum is Morgan Frost, who didn't see a lot of ice time, saw some power play time, but really is not being utilized. I remember when I even saw him like come out for
9
the shootout.
9 minutes and 30 seconds last night.
Yeah,
he's the second lowest forward of time on ice, other than Nick Delorier.
Right. Yeah, I knew who the lowest would be. But like looking when Frost went out for the penalty shot, or not the penalty shot, I'm sorry, the shootout shot at the end there. I was like, man, I did not hear his name once tonight.
Invisible, yeah.
Yeah, even in the time that he's had, he's been invisible. Not like struggling to bury it. And that was probably his worst game. I don't think he's had like a horrible season, but he's got 1 goal, 5 assists.
A lot of near misses. He should probably have like 4 or 5 goals. He's had like 3 or 4 empty nets that he just has hit wide. It's a confidence thing, I think, for him right now. You could tell that he's kind of fighting it, right?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I hate that we're like returning back to this conversation, but he is, I believe, didn't double check this, but I'm pretty sure he's on the last year of his deal.
Yeah.
And you look at where he is with this team. I don't think they're going to get rid of him or drop him to the minors or something, ridiculous like that. But I do think probably need to look at the fact that if this is going to be another one of these up and down years,
this is just who he is. Yeah.
It's not even that's who he is that I don't believe that Morgan Frost will be back here next season if this is what continues. Even if he finishes with 40 plus points on the year, if he puts in like 10, 15 goals or whatever and 25, 30 assists, yeah. I do look at the idea like the Flyers have all these draft picks, they have a young center. There is an opportunity here to potentially flip him for something that they need.
I agree. I do think it is a consistency thing for him. Like, I think the Flyers wanted to see him take that step and be a little bit more consistent in his game.
He still might.
He may. It's early, but I just think to this point so far, he has not been consistent, right? Like, he's shown some chances where he's created offensively. He didn't pot on those opportunities, and you can see it that it's kind of taken away from his game. Like, almost not scoring those goals is taking a little bit of confidence away from him. He hasn't kind of been able to get back to that place where he ended last season. And you have to give Tortorella credit in a sense that Frost is usually a guy that I don't want to say he's his whipping boy, but I mean, he's been very quick to bench Frost. He's given him a lot of rope this season, right? Like, yeah. And we've really only seen the ice time start to dwindle recently. Like, look at the last before the game against Minnesota, pretty much every game he was over 14 minutes of ice time. Ever since that Minnesota game, it's been a little bit different. So 11 minutes of ice time against Minnesota, 13:30 against the Habs, 12:30 against Boston, 13:50 against St. Louis. He got up to 18 minutes against Boston. Back to like 13:30 against Carolina, 15 minutes against Tampa, and then 9 minutes last night against Florida. So you've seen him kind of go up and down and everywhere, and Torch is giving him a chance to rebound, obviously. But I just think with his performance against Florida, it was super invisible. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy that comes out for Michkov to re-enter.
Yeah, it's possible. They're a little light at center, so I don't know about that, especially with Paling out. Yeah. But it's possible. I'm not going to say
Torts do it before, so
right. I just don't know who they're going to have play the middle. They have 5 centers. If Paling's out and they sit, because they didn't call up a center either. It's not like they called up Abels or whatever. Yeah. So I don't know if they're going to bench him necessarily. They might drop him in the lineup. That might be
Fourth
something.
Line,
Like they might switch
him and
Cates, right, or elevate Lawton. So we'll see how that works out, but I like something in my gut tells me that like I watched what happened with Ronnie Attard, where the Flyers are like, okay, now's the time, right? Like they knew it. Like he regressed most likely because of the disappointment of not making the NHL. We saw that with Ule Lixell, who's by the way is like on fire now. He had 10 shots on net last game. So it does kind of hit these guys emotionally, right? When they don't make the team, and especially when they're right in that mid-20s and the reality of their careers kind of hitting them, where they thought they would be at least like in their beginning of their NHL career, at 24, 25. Yep. And I think, with Frost, it's kind of like I know a lot of people will be like, he's not worth anything. That's not true. Teams know that he has a high point. I don't know what he's worth, but there are teams that would probably welcome Morgan Frost into their lineup and could use a player like that. And he might be like a change of scenery type of situation for a team who maybe lacks some center depth or really needs a third line, like playmaking center. And there might be an option. I don't know if the Flyers are going to jump to that or anything right now. But he does kind of seem to be falling into that spot. And, it's weird because that's our biggest need is what he is. So I think they'll give it obviously more time. But it does feel like he's kind of dancing into that zone right now. He's really got to find a way to minimize, because even if he's not impacting the game offensively, he's not necessarily impacting it defensively either. He's not a net negative on D, but he's not like making big blocks or, winning puck battles along the boards or
that's not his game. Like they're relying on him for offense. That's what they want from him.
Right. That's what, again, we go back to Michkov, and that's where I'm like annoyed because I'm like, he's making an impact every game. Even if he wasn't perfect defensively, he's still an impact every game.
And that's why you can look at it and compare and say like
does become invisible at times.
Yeah, that's why you compare it.
Michkov is never invisible.
Yeah, that's why you compare it and you're kind of thinking to yourself like, why, like Frost is struggling so much offensively, Michkov's not. it doesn't make a lot of sense. Is it really fair? But I get it because they're trying to develop Michkov. Frost a little bit later in his development. But I do think for Frost, it's a consistency thing. Like they want to see him actually be consistent and, not have these stretches where he's invisible. And I think far too often, he's had these stretches over the last couple seasons where it makes you wonder, like, maybe he is just this guy where for 10 games he might be super hot, and then for 15 he kind of doesn't do much, and then for another 10 games he looks really good again, right? And that's just what certain guys are at the NHL level. It just is what it is, right?
Yeah. And I mean, we look at like somebody like, again, to go back to Michkov, we look at somebody like Ovechkin, who, oh my God, what's the GM of Nashville? Oh my
Barry
God.
Trotz.
Barry Trotz, thank you. Until Barry Trotz went over to Washington, Ovechkin was known as like kind of a net negative on D, like would kind of half-ass his defensive play. Then, Trotz kind of changed that with Washington. Then they won a championship, and you really don't hear that about Tippett anymore. So I think that's like
Ovechkin?
What did I say?
Tippett.
Did I say Tippett? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so Ovechkin, you don't hear that about Ovechkin really anymore. And I think that Tortorella is trying to jump on that early with Michkov to try to like do what Trotz did for Ovechkin early in his career to help him become more defensively conscious. I feel that he did that to Frost, to be honest, because Frost wasn't that good defensively. Now he's actually adequate defensively, where he's like almost never a net negative defensively, but he falls asleep on the offensive side for whatever reason. And he's not at the end of his rope. Like, he's an NHL player. It's just, I don't know how much longer the Flyers want to hold on, because what kind of contract do you give him next? That's why I was kind of looking at it. I was like, you give him another bridge?
Think that spot probably goes to Luchanko.
Right. Next year. Right. For sure. Yeah. Almost for sure. And we'll talk about Luchanko later. But I think it's kind of, this is your season, Frosty. So it's like, he's not getting the Tippett deal. Farabee got his deal, and he's in the camp with those two guys. So it's like, and he tends to disappear for longer stretches than both of them. So again, he's an important role. We'll see. This will not be forever with Frost, and we'll see how we feel about him in a few games, because he probably will find his way out of this as well. But right now, 6 points in 15 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, just not good enough, right? He's not way behind the other guys statistically. Like, I think Tippett and Farabee both have 7 points, so it's not like a huge difference.
But they look that they're they don't look playing better,
right? They also don't. They're not as invisible during their games as Frost tends to be when he plays at his worst. Right? Yep. He was completely invisible against Florida in a game where the rest of the team was playing well. And I always talk about that. It's easy to pick on a guy when everybody's playing poorly, but when everybody's playing well, and then you're the one guy who's not, that's where I look at it a lot of times.
Yep.
And that's what we're seeing with Frost a little bit too, is that the other guys are coming out of it and he's not so much. Where other times where he struggled offensively, he just like wasn't having much luck. We'll see how it goes. Two guys who are playing consistently really well, Travis Konechny and Sean Couturier. I think Coots is back to where he was at the beginning of last season. He has been good every single game, whether he's put up a point or not. He is just winning puck battles. He's honestly, in my opinion, his productivity is going to go up if he continues to do what he's doing. I'm very happy with the way Sean Couturier looks right now. It's almost like kind of glad that they brought him in slowly, because they're not overutilizing him. This is all like been really nice, honestly. And I'll be honest, when it comes to Travis Konechny, I think he's hit another level. I think he's better this year than he was last year. I think last year he was really successful offensively on the PK. The team is not scoring as much on the PK this year, but on the power play, some of that, thank you to Michkov, but on the power play at 5-on-5, I think he's been better. So, and he's above a point per game by 1 point right now. I think that's probably what TK is. I don't think he's like 100-plus point player in the league unless he's on like an ideal line, like playing with a guy like McDavid or Nathan McKinnon, or Kucherov. Like, I think if he plays with one of those guys, which Michkov is not there yet, he can be a 100-point player. But I think if he's like just on a good line with good players, he's a point per game minimum type of player. And I think that's what we're looking at. And getting Sean Couturier back to where he was, I don't even think people realize how huge that is. And Tortorella is playing him as such. All situation player, getting power play time, getting PK, playing 5-on-5. He's been very good every game on both ends of the ice. Like, again, very good's a little strong, but very good defensively and good offensively. And TK, I think, has hit another level. I think every single game, he had like that 4-point night the other night. Like he had the huge game, the 5-point night against Minnesota. Like he wasn't doing this last year. He is putting up like large games. And I think he's been doing it when the rest of the team has been struggling too, which we saw some of that last year. But I think this is the Travis Konechny. I think last year he was edging toward it, and now he's here. He is a point per game plus player in the NHL. 80 to 100 points is probably his regular window, assuming he's healthy. But what do you think about that? I think Konechny is hitting another level, and I think he's going to get better as the season goes on too.
Yeah, I think Couturier and Konechny have been the steadiest forwards on the team for the whole season. They've been the most consistent players, right? And I think it's pretty easy to see that. I would say both of them have been kind of stuck together, and there's a good reason. They've been a tandem in the past that have had has had a lot of success and a lot of chemistry. So I think these are guys that you keep together in pairs, and you kind of see who you can fit with them at certain points, right? Maybe when other guys might not be working. So right now Tippett's working, and you have that pair of Couturier and Konechny. But like I said earlier, right, like that Michkov Couturier Konechny line, they haven't been together for games at this point, and they're still, by Money Puck's best offensive lines, is still 30th with a 60.6 expected goals for, and that's probably because of Couturier and Konechny, a little bit less of Michkov, right, in terms of the 5-on-5 there. But those two have been, some of the best players for the Flyers, probably the two best players offensively, I would say. Michkov as well, really good too. But when you look at Couturier and kind of understanding, that he's back to form, just look at his usage compared to the beginning of the season to now. Like, up until the Boston game where they lost 3-0, he was really only averaging around like 15, 16, 17 minutes a night. The last 3-4 games, Tortorella's using him a ton. So against Carolina, 20 minutes, 11 seconds. Against Tampa, 23 minutes, 27. Against Florida, 24 minutes, 21 seconds. So they're using him like a first-line center, and he's playing that way. It's not an easy task to shut down Alexander Barkov. Couturier did a really good job of that. Against the Panthers. He played against them a lot in that game and really drove play the other way, even though Barkov did have his chances, obviously. And Konechny's the same, kind of deal, right? Like, he's also getting a ton of usage. Like, he played 24 minutes and 8 seconds against the Panthers, 23-17 against Tampa, 22-11 against Carolina. And for him, it's really been all season. I'm pretty sure he has, 12 games over 20 minutes already out of the 16. So they're using him a lot. So I wonder if they're going to maybe try to drop it down a bit as we see some other guys step up, like a Farabee, like a Tippett. Yeah. I think it's smart, but it just shows you that those guys with that usage, how consistent they have been. Tortorella's had to rely on them, especially due to the fact that some of these other guys like a Frost, Tippett, like a Brink, they haven't really been pulling their weight till recently offensively. So I think now that you're seeing, some of those other guys step their game up, and we have Couturier and Konechny that are continuing to play well, this is where you see the team probably turn things around in the homestand, or you have to hope anyway, but the signs are pointing in that direction. So
yeah, well said. All right, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. If you're watching here on YouTube, hit the notification bell for notifications. And also follow us on Spotify and iTunes for the audio version, and give us a review and a follow there as well. Okay, another player that, man, I don't even know what to do with this guy, because Cam York is on the precipice of returning. We already have 7 NHL defensemen at the NHL level without York part of the group, and Emil Andre had his season high in minutes last game. And he's looked better than Zamula. I think last night he took away some of Drysdale's minutes. Yeah. And again, he's about the same age as Drysdale, plays a different game. Drysdale's more pure offensive guy. Emil's the comparison is like a Kimmo Timonen type, kind of living up to that name. And he is the type of guy, because of his size.
He's feisty. He's feisty.
I feel like he's going to develop a little later, looking like a top 4 defenseman prospect that we hoped he was going to be. He's been really good, like not putting up a ton of offense, but definitely driving play. Like you said, super feisty, not being out muscled. So he's showing that his size is not an issue, which I think is why Tortorella felt comfortable playing him with Zamula. because he was, initially I think the worry was because of his size, he would need the big body with him because Zamula doesn't play a big body game. But I think Emil Andre, it's going to be really tough to take him out of the lineup. I don't know what the Flyers are exactly going to do. This is why I think Richard is probably going to get sent back down. They're going to want to obviously hold on to Zamula. I don't think they're going to be rushing to get rid of Zamula. York is clearly going to step right back into the lineup. He's the Flyers' second best, if not best, defenseman on the team. But I think Andre's been really good, and I think he's probably here to stay for the season.
Yeah.
I don't think we've seen anything to warrant him being sent back down.
I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I predicted and said if he gets a chance to stick, he's gonna stay with the team the rest of the season, and that's what we're kind of seeing here, just the way he's playing. I just think it's really his aggressiveness. He knows kind of when to be aggressive and when to pick his spots, at least so far. I mean, there's probably going to be certain points where he makes a mistake, right? And we're going to see how he learns from that because he's still a young defenseman. But so far, he's making really good reads on when to pinch, when to jump up into the rush, when to kind of be aggressive as a defenseman, and also when to sit back. And for his size, like there is, that little bit of kind of a fear that, okay, maybe he's a little bit too undersized. How's he going to handle certain forechecking? But so far, he, for his size has done well. He's held his own. He hasn't looked really overmatched or any egregious turnovers. I think one thing to look at is just Andre, was playing with Sanheim really to end that game against the Panthers. And that's a huge thing to factor in because it shows the confidence. Yeah, it shows the confidence that Tortorella has in him coming in as a young player in the league, right? He I would say surpassed Drysdale in that game. He was playing a lot better than him and looked better than him. It's not to say that that's what's going to happen going ahead or anything, but it's just a matter of, what occurred in that game. But look at the usage, right? Even back to the Montreal game, like he played 1955 against Florida, against Tampa 16 minutes and 7 seconds, against Carolina 14 minutes, against Boston 1912, against St. Louis 17 minutes, against Boston again 14, and then against Montreal 17 minutes. So he's been up and around over 17 minutes almost every game. So they do, show some confidence in him, and they're playing him quite a bit. I would say his facilitating of the puck too on the power play, like power play 2 with him looked a lot smoother than power play 1 against the Panthers last night, and just him kind of being decisive. I think that's kind of where he's beating Zamula out, is Zamula's being a little hesitant in the way he's moving the puck, whereas Andre's decisive. Quick, moving that puck up aggressively. But that's the way the Flyers want to play right now. They want to move the puck up quick, and he's doing a lot of those
He's not
things.
getting exposed because of it.
Yeah, so I think Tortorella sees that, and he says, this guy's really pushing the pace the way that I want the team to play and kind of move the puck from defense to offense. So I think due to that, he's here to stay until we really see like either egregious breakdowns from him, or he kind of stops pushing the pace the way he has been. But so far, I mean, he's outplayed Zamula, and he's looked a little bit better than Drysdale to me the past few games here.
Yeah. Well, I think the ideal situation for the Flyers is that Andre does take Zamula's spot for the long term. And again, Eric Johnson won't be here long term. Zamula's got a 2-year deal.
He can be your 7.
Yeah, so they might go with that option and be able to rotate Zamula in. We'll see what happens, but I think the defensive pairings that probably need to happen when York come back. And I think Tortorella mentioned that he doesn't even know exactly where, like, if he's going to go back to the same old lines. But if we assume that he does, we go back to York, Sanheim.
Yeah.
And then I assume Andre will play with Risto and Drysdale will play with Sealer. And that's not a bad 6 considering, not having like a true all-star number 1 defenseman.
I would say Risto's a great partner for a guy like Andre. I just think like stylistically they fit well. Why not put the 2 Europeans together, the Swedish and the Finland guy? But to your point, like I think it's a no-brainer. You have to put Sanheim and York back. Like if you look at Money Puck's top defensive pairings, they're the 42nd best pairing in the league, and they haven't played together in 3 weeks. Or like 2 weeks at this point.
And the team wasn't playing well when that was happening.
Well, their expected goals is 54.8%. Like I said, that's placing them 42nd in the league of all defensive pairings. So I just think, to your point, like you got to put them back together because they were so good when the team was shit. So imagine, as they turn the corner here, how much better that pairing could potentially be, right?
I guess the other option that Tortorella might go with is maybe he likes Sanheim and Andre, and then you put York with Risto. Either way, I don't think it's a terrible thing to move Drysdale down and keep him on the top power play, and then have Drysdale play with Sealer and give him, opportunity to gain confidence. Because I feel like that's mostly what's wrong with Drysdale right now. Is it's an issue with a lot of guys on this team. Is the confidence is not there, and now a lot of them seem to be like kind of getting out of it, like popping out like daisies.
Yep.
And I think that'll probably transition away until the team can fully move forward. Last year we were so used to them just coming right out of the gate, confident and playing hard, and this year that has not been the case. So you have to kind of wait for them to all come out. And I think when they do get out of this, which they will, and they are showing that they will, they might be a better team than they were last year. And they could go on a little bit of a run here. I'm not saying they're going to win 10 in a row, but win four in a row, maybe 5 in a row, and that gets them out of the bottom already and back into the playoff conversation. This season could turn around real quickly, and I think if these deep pairs work out, and Andre right now is playing better than Zamula has ever looked at the NHL level, right? So it is an upgrade already, right? And between Andre and Drysdale, that makes up for losing Sean Walker last year. So if you have a solid 6 like you did the previous year, and Risto was out, Risto is having a good year. People can say whatever they want about Risto. He's a good defenseman.
He's looked good. He's solid.
Yeah, he's been one of their best defensemen. So that's a lot of guys that the coaches can rely on, and then 4 puck moving defensemen and 2 defensive defensemen.
Yeah, when you're trying to play a rush offense like they are, that's kind of what you need. You need guys to be able to facilitate that puck quickly, and Andre, he's been doing that. So.
And Andre's better on the power play than Zamula. Clear cut.
He looked better than Drysdale on the power play to me too.
But I mean, even when Drysdale at the top of his game, let's take because Drysdale has a lot of tools in his arsenal. There's
a lot of potential that. Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't have those tools. He's more of just like a steady guy who can skate, move the puck, has some hands, has a shot. But he's like, there's nothing about Zamula's game that is like a standout. There are standouts in Andre's game.
Of course.
Yeah. Right.
And that's why you want to keep him around long term, obviously.
Yeah. He's the long term option. We'll see what they do, but I think Andre stepping up right now is huge. So let's touch on goalies, then we'll do phantoms, and we'll do prospects, and we'll end on that. So goalie-wise, let's talk about Fedotov first. So Fedotov played awful up until Tampa Bay. He had a moment in that Tampa Bay game where he got out of position, and
you can't play that way, but he rebounded, so I got to give him credit for that.
So the Kucherov goal wasn't good. I'm not going to say it's 100% on him because the team around him also like Kucherov, and it's Kucherov.
Okay? He drew Couturier, and I forget who the defenseman was. But
I forget too.
He drew them basically into him, and then Fedotov overplayed it. He thought he was going to jam the puck. That's a really bad read on him.
Yeah,
maybe in the KHL guys try to jam it in, they don't do the wraparound. But like I said, I got to give him credit because think about all those previous games, and his confidence is probably at a low. He could have let things completely spiral from that point, and he did not. So
and the quicksand was there for him to fall into, and he rebounded really well. He didn't have to make any. He had a couple really strong saves. The team played really well around him, which I think helped him not kind of spiral, right? But he played by far his best game, including last season as a Flyer.
Good in the shootout, too.
Very important because clearly the Flyers need 3 goalies. Kolosov, as of right now, is injured. I believe he's day-to-day. We don't really know what the deal with Kolosov is. But we need Fedotov to be useful. We can't have him be a complete bomb. And I think that was a really important game. And shout out to Chris Mayer, who had a great tweet about it, just showing Fedotov's reaction after the shootout win. And he just like the relief that fell off. Because, the guy's been dreaming about playing in the NHL. He's watching it fall apart in front of him. And then, to come out and have a solid game, give up one savable goal, right? But then play really solid beyond that, and to show he can at least be an NHL goalie and get probably some of Tortorella's confidence in him back, where he doesn't have to say the guy just doesn't have it, was really important.
Yeah, I think for Fedotov, it's just an amazing story. Right? Like, think about all the things that this guy's been through, like forced military service, getting detained, having to do that, making it all the way to the NHL. To your point, like Chris's tweet and like seeing the way he celebrated, you could tell that it meant a lot to him. And that's the human nature and the human side of it. Like I saw so many people ripping this guy apart online. Like, like he's been through a lot. Like he obviously wasn't playing well, but he's played a total of 7 NHL games, and you have to give him credit where credit's due. That he could have really spiraled on him, and it didn't. And he really rebounded. He made some big saves against Nikita Kucherov, his fellow countryman. I'm sure that felt really great for him to do that.
Yeah,
but you got to understand, like 7 games for a goalie in a new league, new environment, depth perception totally different. Like you're really not going to know what this guy is until at least plays 20, 30 games in the league. So the jury's still out, but it's a great step forward for him, something to really build on. I would say like the most important thing is what's his biggest asset as a goaltender is his size. And I would say that this was the first game you saw him actually use his size to his advantage and not as a disadvantage, where before the size was making him look like sloppy. He's flopping around everywhere. And in this game against Tampa, he actually used his size advantageously and really, closed off certain plays, was able to shut down, certain angles that players were trying to kind of use and score on him. So I think Fedotov played a really strong game. Interested to see how he follows it up, but it can really only go up from his first couple of performances, obviously. So it's great to see. It's a great story, especially for him.
Yeah, and I'm more interested in seeing more now, right? Yeah. And I think we still
build off it and see kind of what else maybe he can bring to the table.
The reality is the Flyers have 3 goalies. Ersson is clear cut the best. He's not been amazing every game, but he's been really good some games,
gives them chances to win,
amazing in other games, and then average in some. We got to remember there's still, Ersson is still a young goalie.
He's developing too.
Yeah, exactly. He's still developing. I'm interested to see where he ends up. But it's important that they have 3 goalies that they can utilize this year. Every team needs 3 goalies in the NHL. That it's just a reality.
Hopefully, and Mac and Yemi too, maybe if you ever needed him.
So. Right, and look, the reality is that Kolosov is also a prospect, so that's kind of ideal. You want a prospect to be your number 3, more veteran guys to be your 1 and 2. I think that's what Nashville was thinking with Askarov, right?
Yep.
And that is kind of the case with Askarov now in San Jose, right? They have 2 more veteran guys. They still have Askarov. They know that that's the guy they want to call up. So, like, this is ideal and not ideal for the Flyers because it is kind of their weakness as a team is the instability in net. But there is promise here. I know on the surface with the numbers, people want to freak out. And if you're not paying attention to the Flyers, you could think it's worse than it is. And it has hurt them in the early part of the year. And I would say part of the confidence problem came from bad goaltending. I mean, the backup goaltenders are 0-6.
Yeah,
well, until recently. Now they're 1-6.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're a team and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh shit!" Like if we're playing this offensive, first rush style type of game, we're going to be giving up chances, and they probably see the goalies in and what's happening. That's you're thinking as a player, man, if we give one up the other way, it's in the back of our net. We can't do that. So that makes you grip your sticks, makes you play a kind of different style that you probably aren't looking to play. But I do think for Fedotov, it's a big building block. Having Ersson kind of return is a huge reliever, right? I mean, if he was out for any significant amount of time, I think it would be a whole different story. So I think the fact that he's back and you have two guys you can rely on as a backup, and that hey, if one falters, there's another one. That's a great situation for Ersson to have that reliability with 2 guys there, but also a great situation for the Flyers. You can go back and forth. Let's say if maybe one guy's a little bit off in Fedotov, you go to Kolosov or vice versa. But Ersson, the fact that he could come back and the fact that groin injury wasn't major, that's a huge relief because, like I said, right, he's been a major reason that they're winning pretty much all the games they've won so far. He's kept them in those games, so they're going to be relying on Ersson quite a bit this season.
We'll see what happens with Erik Johnson, actually, because if they plan on keeping 3 goalies at the NHL level, they might have to waive Erik Johnson and just keep him with the team and just not play him. You know what I mean?
See what happens, yeah.
Like, that might happen. I think that's possible just with the Andre situation. Like, obviously you can send down Richard. Yeah, I guess we'll see if there's more injuries, which is always possible. So they don't have to make a decision right now. But and Kolosov's still injured, right? So Kolosov and Paling
technically counts as an injury. Yeah,
but we'll see what happens. So let's talk about the Phantoms real quick. So the Phantoms, as of right now, let me actually pull this up. So as of right now, the Phantoms are not doing as terrible anymore. They are fourth in their division. There are four divisions. They're 4 out of 8 teams. In the conference, they're right in the middle of the pack at 9. They are 5-3-2-1 on the season. They've won 2 games in a row. Things are starting to head in a positive direction. And guys are starting to put up numbers. Two of the most interesting ones that we're going to talk about right now. The first one is somebody that Vasili and I have brought up quite a bit, Alexis Gendron, who, again, this is kind of the stuff that, the two of us have questioned over time. But Alexis Gendron last game had 2 goals. And if you watch the highlights of that game, they're like goal scorer goals. Like, he looks like a pure sniper.
On one knee, shooting, ripping it top shelf, stuff like that. It
kind of looks like Anthony Richard
a little bit.
In a way, only with a better shot than Richard. And it's getting interesting because he is a point per game right now, not getting a ton of ice time, but that might change now that he's because he's been putting up points pretty much every game.
3 goals in 5 games right now.
Yeah,
not getting much ice.
I think he has 2 assists too, right? I think he's 5 and 5. Yeah.
No, 4 and 5.
4 and 5. Sorry. So he's got 3 goals, 1 assist.
Yeah.
Again, he's 19 years old, so he's a goal scorer. That's what he's been doing the whole time. Very important that he shows that off at the AHL level. Nowhere near NHL ready, but I am hoping that he will start moving up the lineup. Ule Excel is starting to heat up. He was dead cold. Like I said, he had 10 shots on net the other night. The game before that, he had a goal and an assist. But yeah, Gendron looking solid, kind of sticking out. Also, Hunter McDonald has been putting up points slowly. He's got 5 assists in 10 games. The Phantoms are starting to get going here. And the newcomer, Ben Gleason, he had an assist the other night in his first game. Really important. And then the big one is really Samu Tuomala. He had a snipe the other night. He is just around a point per game. He is just continuing exactly where he last left off. I don't know where he's going to end up now, with the way the Flyers roster is looking. But I think, again, Richard was the guy to call up early in the year. But assuming Tuomala does what he does, I don't think Richard is going to get that call up later, and I think it's going to go to Tuomala. Yeah. But very important that Tuomala continues to do what he's doing, because he's most likely getting penciled into this lineup for next year, or at least he's going to be a serious consideration for the lineup next year. And again, there's a lot of decisions to be made with this team. So we might actually see more trades in the offseason than we expect. It might be a very busy offseason for the Flyers, and this roster might come in looking different than what it looked like this year, with guys like Luchanko and Tuomala coming up. And, Forrester's obviously here to stay, but then, what's going to happen with Bobby Brink? What's going to happen with Morgan Frost? Most likely Farabee's sticking and Tippett's sticking and Michkov will be here. So it's there's going to be some changes probably. And we also cannot forget that Scott Lawton's last year of his deal is next year. So, again, some good stuff. I think Elliot Denoyer is kind of finding his way
down the depth chart. Yeah.
I think maybe out of the organization, to be honest with you.
It could be with all these prospects, scenery. With all these prospects coming in. But yeah, I think Tuomala, he's definitely going to be called up at some point. I think it's just a matter of time, almost a point a game. But he's looked good at the AHL level. And Gendron's a guy we've kind of always been a fan of. So I'm interested to see kind of how he continues to progress. But the goal scoring knack's always been there for him, and it's coming at the AHL level in very limited minutes. So I'm wondering what he could do maybe with top line minutes potentially.
Yeah, he might be a guy who suddenly ends up being a third line goal scorer at the NHL level. I don't know if he's ever going to be a big time scorer,
but he has the shot for sure.
But a 20 goal scorer at the NHL level playing third line minutes.
I think he has an NHL level type shot. I just think the other things need a lot of work to get him to actually get to that NHL level.
Right. He's got the speed at least.
Yeah.
He's got the speed to play. He's fast.
And the shot.
And he's got a big shot. So my whole thing is, if you have something that sticks out, that is clear-cut NHL.
You can build on that. You can build on that.
Yes, where somebody like Denoyer never had anything about his game outside of hustle that was
and the IQ apparently.
Right, that stuck out. Yeah. Avon I really
Speed.
like. He's got NHL speed, but nothing about his game beyond that is like sticks out. In Gendron's case, there is something about his game that sticks out. So I'm curious. And Tuamala just seems like a Swiss Army knife offensive player, like
Yep.
ideal third line
Hard on the
scorer type
boards
of
as
guy
well.
who could end up, being more like very good complementary and also great speed.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, we'll see. We'll keep an eye on the Phantoms. Again, Cal Peterson earned a win and Makaniemi earned a win. So we'll see how those guys do. Their numbers are not amazing, but they're also not terrible. Peterson's been playing okay outside of one game. So it's good to see. It's important. I really want to see the Phantoms be a good team this year. And when they get Richard back, which I assume they will, they could start being a dangerous team when the other guys wake up. Like Lixell's not, or not Lixell. Eklund's actually been putting up points too recently. I think he had 2 goals the other night also. So they need this. They need to be a good team. All right, and prospect updates. We're not going to do what we usually do since we just did it like a few days ago. We'll do a full-on prospect update next time. The biggest one is that there was actually a game today as before we recorded this.
London Guelph. London beat Guelph 8-7. Jett Luchanko, obviously a standout. That's probably the major reason we're mentioning this. But 4 assists in that game, +3, 0 shots on goal, but 19 for 25 on the faceoff dot as well. So
dominant.
He killed it. And I mean, he's more
against
of a playmaker anyway.
Team.
Yeah, he's more of a playmaker anyway. But yeah, for Guelph to show up against London like that, that's a pretty big win for them because, as we were saying in previous episodes, they've been getting shellacked quite a bit lately. So at least they can show a little bit of scoring punch. And then from the London side, Oliver Bonk gets 2 assists and 2 points. He's a +2 and has 4 shots on goal. And then Denver Barkey doesn't get any points. Is actually a -2.
I saw him. He got robbed. I was watching some of the game. He got absolutely
I didn't get to catch it, but
in the game. Yeah, so he should have probably had a goal. The goalie made, I don't know the name of the Guelph goalie, but he made a ridiculous save.
Okay.
Like literally like stretch out, like wide open net and like managed to get it. Like,
shout out to that goalie. Sometimes those are tough ones, man.
Yeah,
when they come across like that.
Yeah. Barkey's been a little snake bit. Again, he started off with mono, then sped up. But again, they're a powerhouse team.
Yeah.
And
for them, they want to get back to the playoffs. Like they want Memorial Cup bound type of thing, right?
Well, for Guelph to do what they did, and you got to realize like Luchanko's line pretty much carried Guelph against London, where they're outmatched, scored 7 goals. And that leaves Luchanko now with 2 goals, 6 assists in 6 games. 8 points. He's now a plus player. It took him a little bit. There was probably some disappointment of being sent back, and there's some adjustment. But this is what I was talking about. People made fun of me when I said this in the offseason before he made the Flyers for like opening roster. I said, I'm like, I expect Luchanko to be, 100+ point player this year. And he is trending in that direction of being one of the top players in the CHL in general. And I think the goal scoring is going to come too. And I think we're looking at like
he scored the other night on a breakaway. So
yeah, I mean he's on pace right now for over 100 points, and I think that's going to increase to like that 120 pace level, like what Barkey did.
I can definitely see it. I just think this is probably his breakout year in the OHL. That's what it looks like to me, anyways.
Yeah, I think he's arrived, and this is what we wanted. When we talked about
dominate that OHL level and then make the jump, right?
Yes, this is what we want. We want him to put up a bunch of points, go play in World Juniors, which I think was always
in the cards.
Jones's and Briere's plan. I think he just impressed them more than they thought, but I'm not shocked about that. But I think this was always the plan. Like, get him out there, get that, and look how important confidence is. Look what happened to the Flyers.
Well, let him be that top. Let him be that top guy. Let him get in those, all those situations as the top line center, and then go to the World Juniors and potentially be one of their top centers, and think about how that's going to build the confidence for him going into next season and being a staple on this team, right? So it'll be interesting to see how he progresses, but I think, it's really good signs, obviously, now that you're seeing Guelph kind of get the offensive game heated up a bit, where it was really cold to start as he got sent back. So
yeah, and he's going to finish his season with Guelph being 18. Like he's essentially, this is his draft year. So like
Basically, for most players, yeah.
Yeah, if he was born 1 month later or 2 weeks later,
He wouldn't have
right?
been drafted.
And he would be looking like a clear cut top 10 pick this year in the NHL. And we took him at 13. So you think about where the Flyers picked him, it's about right for what he's about to do. So this is a high end asset, regardless of what people say. I know the tone about him has changed considerably since he made the Flyers, but I think going into next season, the league is going to be talking about Jett Luchanko. And, the Flyers have a huge draft coming up. No matter where they finish, it's a very important draft with a lot of assets and I just have a feeling we're going in for a much more interesting season than people realize with the on paper stuff. And we might not see it for a while. It might be slow to come in. But remember the thing about Briere, and I've been saying it since the day he took over. The same way he played on the ice is the same way he GMs. He is sneaky aggressive. So you will see stuff come from Briere and we've seen it already, that you just did not anticipate. And I think that's what we're heading into. We're far away from that right now as far as relative to the season. But I think we're going to see a lot more changes than we anticipate coming into next year. And I think this season is going to lay a lot of those plans out for the next 2-3 years on how this team will be structured. And obviously Luchanko is a big part of that. And Bonk and Barkey. And we know Bonk and Barkey will be at very least with the Phantoms next year. And Luchanko will probably be with the Flyers next year. So a lot of stuff coming. All right. Let's call it at that. We kept it at a reasonable hour and a half today. Anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, just thanks everybody for tuning in. We love you all and continue to check out flyersnittygritty.com. Lots of content coming your way.
Yeah. I will be trying to watch as much hockey as I can while I'm away. At least Flyers hockey. I should be able to still watch games. I don't see any issue. Not a big time difference in Brazil than where I am right now. So yeah, I'm excited that the Flyers are not looking like crap. That makes me feel really happy.
It's great to watch games that where they aren't looking terrible. So
yes, for sure. Yeah, it's demoralizing. Now get Michkov back in there so we can all be happy again. All right, just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell for notifications to get notified. If you've listened this far and you have not subscribed so far, what are you doing? All seriousness, please subscribe if you're a fan of what we're doing. Give us a like as well. It's a best way to support us by doing that. And also for the audio versions, go to Spotify and iTunes and pretty much everywhere else they offer audio content. Give us a rating and a follow there as well. These are the best way to support our podcast. And again, shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from one of the best, if not the best cheesesteak in the Philadelphia area. Make sure to go check out Jim Steaks. Also, shout out to Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment needs. Again, they will be there to facilitate your process with the insurance companies to take care of all of the icky stuff that comes with dealing with insurance companies. Again, Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And shout out to Sports Spider, our partners, our aggregator of sports content. Make sure to check them out for all of your Flyers news from around the city of Philadelphia and beyond. Again, our stuff is pinned at the top, and the link to sportspider.com is in the description for both the video and the audio version. Sportspider.com. Check them out. All right. Thank you, Vasili. You crushed it. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Too, bro.
We love you. And remember, always stay gritty.